Everybody, welcome back to Dead Reckoning, Above the Pay Grade with Brian there and Jay. And we are here with another Brian Godawa, screenwriter, author extraordinaire from down in Hollywood. You may have seen his name on a few movies, and you may not have. And what struck us most about why we want to have this guy on is that he knows all about story, because he's a pro story writer, but he has a really interesting take on myth and storytelling.
Yeah, and he's a solid Christian believer and has had some success in Hollywood. You might have seen his critically acclaimed film, the one that he wrote a screenplay for, To End All Wars, starring Kiefer Sutherland, which was a fantastic movie. If you haven't seen it, you've got to go see it. So, fantastic. Welcome to Dead Reckoning, Brian.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So, Brian, you talk a lot about just to break it down really quick. You talk a lot about myth in your latest book, and
When Myth Became Fact is the title
and myth
of the
frequently
of the book.
is misinterpreted or kind of misunderstood, because when we look at myth and look at the Bible, we go, oh, well, it's not fake, it's all real, right? Well, maybe it is myth. Explain that a little bit for us.
Yeah, sure. That's myth has an unfortunate reputation now, particularly in the religious community, in the Christian community. And basically, when you say that word, people automatically think, oh, it's an invective. It's false. You know, that's what scientists call Christianity. Oh, it's myth. It's fairy tale, right? And unfortunately, that's a bad reputation that's not deserved, because in point of fact, mythology is actually a part of all philosophy. It's a part of history. It's a part of theology, because mythology actually, the way that mythologists define that, and the way that academics and professionals define it, it's really more, mythology is, rather than being like, this is a story that isn't true to fake people out.
Yeah.
What it really means, that's what the common parlance means, but what it really means is mythology, or the mythos of a culture, is the narrative that gives meaning to cultural values. Now, that narrative could be true, historically true, or it might not be, and that's really what it means. So when we talk about the myth of Christianity, we're not saying that it's false and that it never happened or anything like that. What we're saying is the embodiment of the values and meaning and essence of what Christianity is. So say the myth of Christianity would be, for example, that people are sinners, they're separated from God, and they need forgiveness and atonement, and Christ dies on the cross, and that death it frees his people who believe in him from their sin. That's the mythos, or the myth of Christianity. I think it'd be great if we got a new word for it, so that because I know that when you say that word, people just keep having a hard time with it, even when you define it for them. Yeah, but suffice it to say that my hero, two of my heroes, and which happen to be obviously very common heroes in Christianity, are of course J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and they were very conversant in the discourse of mythology, and they, I think, helped bring back a more positive understanding of it.
Right, and so now you, as I understand it, you're writing a series of books based on the Old Testament stories, and you're kind of exploring those in creative ways. Tell us about this book series. What inspired you to write it? Tell us a little bit about the stories and what you're trying to do with them.
Sure. I'm writing a series of novels. It's going to be about I'm on my 5th and 6th novel now, and it's going to be about 8 total. And it's called Chronicles of the Nephilim. And the first book in the series is called Noah Primeval. I got inspired a few years back. I was actually writing a screenplay on the life of Noah, because that was a Bible character that no one's done before. But what had influenced me was I had always considered Genesis 6, 1 through 4, to be the weirdest passage in the Bible.
Yeah. I think I have to agree. I still have no idea. I can't make heads or tails of it.
Really, and it basically says, that but before the flood, wickedness on the earth was great, and it says that the sons of God in heaven, divine beings in heaven, saw that the daughters of men on earth were beautiful, and they mated with them, and they bore them giants. And then the word for giants is Nephilim.
Right.
It's a word that's transliterated in our Bible because it causes a lot of problems with people's theology. So they just leave it as Nephilim, which actually is a Hebrew transliteration. But Nephilim is, has been argued there are different views of it, but I basically am convinced that it's definitely the word for giants. And, so we have a world before the flood that is highly wicked, and we have angels mating with humans, and it's a bad thing. It's a violation of God's heavenly divide between earth and heaven. We read in the Bible all kinds of separations that God makes. He separates male from female, animals after their own kind, angel from human, all this kind of stuff. And so this angel mating with humanity is a violation of that separation. And that's from which we get a lot of the pagan mythology of Titans being, gods sleeping with mortals, and bearing them Titans. So there's a lot of connections going on there. But the heart of it is that this is weirdest thing to me, and I was always thinking, like, what is this? I'll chalk it down to one of those unexplained mysteries of the Bible. But then I discovered this a biblical scholar whose name is Michael Heiser, and you can find him on the web. He's got a great website, michaelheiser.com, michaelsheiser.com. And he is an evangelical Christian, so he's not some wacko guy, but he has done extensive study on this material, and he opened my eyes like Elijah's servant, I often say, and I started to see that this giant thing is a thread throughout the Bible. There's lots more about them. There are little pieces here and there that you tend to just breeze over because it's just, that's another weird thing. But they're all connected, and I saw this storyline that was amazing to me. And I coupled that with the notion of Noah. And I thought, we think of Noah as like the Sunday school character with the little, cartoons of animals, right?
Cute little koala bears. Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
But if you read the passage, there's a lot of wickedness and violence. In fact, that's why God destroyed the world, because there was so much violence going on. And so I thought, what would this world really be like? And I thought, we think of Noah as this old farmer with a white beard, but if they lived to be 500, 600, 900 years old, they probably wouldn't look at that old as we would now, right? So I thought, well, we don't know what Noah did. Maybe he was a warrior. And in fact, to exist in a very violent world, you probably would have to be a warrior. So I told this story, a new take on Noah. And my premise was this. My premise was, I wanted to write this like Lord of the Rings, had that influence of Tolkien and Lewis on me. I wanted to write like Lord of the Rings, in that in the Bible, there are a lot of poetic images. We've got the Sheol, which is the underworld. We've got Leviathan, the sea dragon, that shows up in these poetic passages. And, they're intended to describe something very theological, which we could talk about that later. But my point was, I thought, well, what if I literalized some of these poetic metaphors into the story and make it a theological novel? So therefore I made a real live sea dragon called Leviathan. Even though in the Bible he represents chaos, I actually made him literal. And so we have all these battles, and we have romance, and it's, like I said, it's like Lord of the Rings. Now I was fearful that, religious people might consider that, you're playing with the Bible. But I tried to remain as true to the spirit of it, and I call it a theological novel because I'm really writing about the meaning behind the text more than anything. So I was writing the script, right? And I found out that Darren Aronofsky was making his movie about Noah.
Right.
And that was a couple years ago. And so I realized, okay, I lost. I'm not going to win that one. But I had to get it out. So I decided to put it out as a novel. And from there, I just kept writing, and the novels kept flowing. I went from there to a prequel called Enoch Primordial, then Gilgamesh Immortal, which is after the flood. Gilgamesh isn't in the Bible, but he is related to the Bible. And then Abraham Allegiant, and now I'm working on my fifth and sixth novels. And it's this storyline of the Nephilim and the giants and what it all means to the war of the seed of the serpent against the seed of Eve.
Wow.
And so it's just this vast panoply, this cinematic landscape of storytelling that, like I said, I wanted to translate that in an imaginative way for believers in the Bible who could appreciate it. So this is not your Sunday school Noah. This is not your Sunday school stories of, this is a very hard and very wicked world that God has to bring his people out of in the midst of it. So that was sort of the genesis of it all. And I'm still writing, and it's just amazing how much material that I stumble across. So what I do is in each novel, I do a lot of historical and biblical research, and it's been so inspired. One of my heroes is Michael Crichton. And Michael Crichton would always write an appendix at the back of his book explaining the real science behind the fiction in his novel.
Yeah, right.
And so I felt like I wanted to do that too, because that's kind of how I am. And I thought some people might be bored by it, some people might not care about it, but that's what I like, and maybe others would. So at the end of every novel, I have these appendixes that explain the theological, historical, and research behind it all that people have ended up really becoming fascinated with. Some of them have liked it as much as the novel.
That's really great. It reminds me also. It reminds me of course, Anne Rice in her book, the first one about Jesus, Christ the Lord. She had a really wonderful afterword there where she talked about all the biblical scholarship and N.T. Wright and all these people that she read, and I just thought, wow, I mean, those guys just got popularized in a way I don't think they imagined they ever would.
Brian, you're in a very unique position in being a Christian professional in Hollywood, and you have a very interesting take on it. And as I was reading Myth Became Fact, I was struck by how many parallels, specifically to violence, that you drew throughout Scripture, saying here is actually how God is telling his story. And that, and Brian had texted me like last night or something, said, man, you have got to read chapter 6 on horror. And I've heard some stuff going on and about, kind of a Christian take on horror. And I was at a film finance conference last year in Nashville, and one of the major distributors kind of looked at the audience and said, okay, guys, where's our Christian horror films? Where's our Christian, thriller films? Where's this stuff? He's like, we don't have it yet. And this was coming from a major distributor, and I was kind of scratching my head, and you could see people throughout the audience. They were kind of like,
horror film, Christian horror film?
And you sum up. It's funny because I was, part of you have a quote from a particular guy in the film industry. Well, I wouldn't call him film industry. He's like loosely affiliated. I screened a film at his conference this last year, and you say, one writer argues, horror is an example of a genre which was conceived in rebellion. It is based on a fascination with ungodly fear. It should not be imitated, propagated, or encouraged. It cannot be redeemed because it is presuppositionally at war with God. And that's, Doug Phillips of the Vision Forum.
So Brian, I read your chapter, and you convinced me that Doug Phillips is completely wrong about this, but share with our audience a little bit, because I don't get into horror films.
I'm not
at
a big
all.
horror. I don't like being scared.
But you had me when you talked about The Addiction, which I believe is the greatest Christian film ever made. Yeah, all right. See, so you and I, we're going to get along just fine. I love that movie. So you had me there, but tell our audience a little bit about why do you think that horror would be an appropriate genre for Christians to explore in art?
Very good question. And by the way, I want to top this off by saying horror is not for everyone as a genre, just like romance novels are not for everyone. Right. There are different genres that appeal to different kinds of people and different kinds of story for different kinds of purposes. And my pursuit and understanding of horror is not this sort of ad hoc after the fact that many Christians do, like they like something and so then then we justify it. Let's find Bible verses that justify it. I'm actually making an more aggressive argument, saying, no, you have to accept it as not just as, it's acceptable and maybe we can do a sanitized, holy version of it. What I'm saying is God himself actually uses the genre of horror many times throughout the Bible to communicate his holy truth to us. So that in fact, horror is a God-ordained genre is what I'm actually saying. Again, I'm not saying that therefore it's for everyone. Just like not every you don't want to read every chapter in the Bible to children, right? Because if you read Ezekiel 16 or 23, you're going to have some really difficult explaining about whores and prostitutes having sex with everything that comes by, that kind of a thing. You're going to avoid some passages in the Bible. So in the same way, horror isn't for everyone. But the heart of it is this. And I appreciate how many people, a lot of it can be gross out. And by the way, defending a genre does not mean you're defending every movie that's part of that genre.
Right.
There are very wicked or terrible examples of horror that are full of gratuitous violence and sex.
The celebration, the celebration of the depravity. Right.
Yes, exactly. But actually, that's more in the cult area. I would argue in the mainstream, and the mainstream type films, you couldn't get away with that. You have to have moral foundation to the storytelling you're doing, or you won't make money.
Yeah.
And so that's one good thing, that sometimes Hollywood responds to money. But the heart of it is that the essence of horror, that as God uses it in the Bible, is it is the means by which an evil, how can I put this well? It is the means by which sinful humanity their eyes are opened. Our eyes are open to our own sin that we've suppressed in unrighteousness. Right. So, we think, most people think we're good people, etc. But in reality, like the Matrix, right? We're actually born as slaves, and we are not what we think we are. And that's what I think horror does, is it shows the spiritual reality behind the outward facade. So therefore, this is why the prophets used horror a lot. You've got Jeremiah talking about zombies, like eating. They will eat the flesh. It's a symbolism of Israel, being destroyed. Is they will eat your flesh and cook it in the pot. You've got obviously the book of Revelation, which is my personal favorite, and that's in the New Testament, not just the Old Testament. Daniel and Revelation are very, very close in spirit, and those are basically epic horror fantasy fests. I mean, we're talking, mutated monsters running through the streets, 7 heads and horns and eating people. And, we've got all kinds of symbolism. And no matter what interpretation you have of those prophetic events, they're still symbols, and it's still basically using a fictional horror story to talk about what future historical events will be.